A water-damaged parchment leaf sits in a cedar box inside the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aum, Ethiopia, part of a manuscript collection that has not left that building in over 400 years. It contains chapters from the Book of Enoch. Church leaders voted Enoch out of Scripture in 364 CE, banned it, buried it, called it dangerous. For 17 centuries, it stayed that way. Then, in 1947, 11 copies surfaced in the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, more copies than were found of Deuteronomy, more than Exodus, more than most books that stayed in the Bible. Scholars who translated the oldest fragments found something no one expected. Enoch describes a prison beneath the ocean floor, not a metaphor, a sealed chamber constructed before the flood, holding beings God chose not to destroy, only to contain. He names what's inside. He describes the door. He records why it cannot be opened until the final judgment. In the next several minutes, you will see what the text says, what modern deep-sea research has found in the same location, and why access to the relevant manuscripts has been restricted since 1974. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was removed from Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The passage appears in two places. The first is Enoch 17-19, part of the Book of the Watchers. The second is Enoch 69, in the parable section. Fragment 4, Q206, stored at the Israel Museum Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, contains Aramaic text from chapter 17, dated to around 100 BCE. The Ethiopian GA manuscript at Axum contains the complete version of both sections. Dr. Michael Knibb, whose 1978 Oxford translation remains the standard English edition for scholars, identified chapter 17 as containing geographical language inconsistent with symbolic literature. He meant the text uses compass directions, depth measurements, specific terrain features, not the vague spiritual geography of apocalyptic writing, something more like a survey report, the kind of geologist files after mapping a site, and this is where it gets disturbing. Chapter 17:5 describes Enoch being taken to a place beyond the Great Sea, where the waters above and below converge. The guise uses Bahiabi, the Great Sea, not a river, not a lake, an ocean. Verse 7 describes the floor of this place as dark stone, smooth and cold, unlike any stone found on land. Dark, smooth, cold. Enoch is describing basalt, the volcanic rock that forms the ocean floor. He had no way to know the ocean floor is paved in basalt. No ancient human had seen it. The deepest any ancient person could dive was perhaps 100 feet, and the ocean floor sits 2 miles down on average, and nearly 7 miles deep at its lowest. Yet Enoch describes it accurately. What we're looking at is a 3-part description of what lies beneath. The text begins with the structure. Chapter 18:9 says, Enoch was shown a deep place in the earth, and columns of fire descended into it, and I saw pillars of fire falling downward without end. This is hydrothermal activity, underwater volcanic vents that shoot superheated water into the ocean, some reaching temperatures of 750 degrees Fahrenheit. The ancients called them pillars of fire. We call them black smokers. Same phenomenon, different century. But the text doesn't stop there. What follows in chapter 18:11 is the prison itself. Enoch writes, and beyond the pillars of fire, I saw a great house built from stones of hail and ice, and it had walls of fire around it, and a door I could not open. A house of ice, surrounded by fire, impenetrable. Chapter 19:1 identifies what is inside. The angel Uriel tells Enoch, here shall the angels who cohabited with women stand, their spirits taking many forms defile men, and lead them astray to offer sacrifices to demons as to gods. These are not the same as the watchers imprisoned beneath the desert. These are different beings. Their spirits, the text says, are still active, still able to influence events on the surface, even while the bodies are sealed below. The prison contains their physical forms. Their influence escapes through the door. What follows in chapter 69 is stranger still. Enoch provides the name of the being who manages the seal. Verse 14 names him as Caspiel, described as the one who revealed the secret oath to the holy Michael. The oath is what keeps the door shut, and chapter 69:15 records the oath itself. The oath be sworn before creation, before the ocean existed, before the floor was laid. The seal on this prison was agreed upon before the prison was built. It was planned. The containment of whatever lives beneath the ocean floor was not a response to an emergency. It was a design decision. The distinction matters. Enoch describes two separate categories of imprisoned beings. The watchers under the Judean desert are awaiting trial. They are held in temporary detention before sentencing. But the beings beneath the ocean are described differently. Chapter 19:3 adds a detail. Most Western translations drop entirely. The Gaius says their imprisonment is liam, for ages upon ages. That phrase appears elsewhere in Enoch, only in context, describing permanent conditions, not a holding cell, a permanent installation. Whatever is under the ocean floor was not detained to await judgment. It was removed from the world and sealed away from it indefinitely. What makes this detail unsettling is the reason given. God did not destroy these beings. He could have. The flood destroyed everything on the surface, but these beings were sealed rather than eliminated. Chapter 10, when 9 records God's instruction, destroy all the souls of lust and the children of the watchers, surface beings destroyed. But chapter 19 describes a different class of being that receives a different sentence: containment instead of destruction, sealing instead of annihilation. The text implies these beings could not simply be unmade. They had to be held. The architecture Enoch describes is worth slowing down on. He doesn't say a dark place. He gives materials. Chapter 18:9 specifies the walls are made of stones of hail, ice, compressed under enormous pressure, white, blue, and translucent. The floor is that dark basalt, smooth and cold to the touch. Fire burns along the perimeter walls, but does not melt the ice. Enoch doesn't try to explain that. He just records it the way a first responder writes what they saw without editorializing. Outside the structure, pillars of superheated water rise from vents in the ocean floor, glowing orange and red in the surrounding darkness. He describes the sound as constant, a low, sustained roar, like something pressurized and contained. The door is set into the ice wall on the side, facing away from the vents. Enoch writes that he reached toward it and Uriel stopped him. No explanation given. Just do not touch it. There is one more detail from the same passage that Western editions strip out entirely. The GA text adds that the door has no handle on the outside. It can only be opened from within. Enoch notes this without comment. Ariel doesn't explain it. The text moves on, but the implication sits there. Whatever is inside is not trying to get out, or it cannot. Either way, the door was not designed for a visitor. It was designed for a warden. And then comes the part the translators removed. The standard English editions of Enoch, including R.H. Charles's 1906 translation that most people still reference, render chapter 17:8 as I saw the treasuries of the winds, treasury of winds, abstract, poetic. The G.A. manuscript in Oxum is more specific. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the 1983 Oxford translation directly from the Ethiopian manuscripts, noted in a private correspondence, later archived at the University of Manchester, that the guy's phrase is Adar Nafas, which carries a secondary meaning, the reservoir of breath, not winds in the meteorological sense, the breath of living things stored, held. The full passage he wrote implies the place beneath the ocean contains something alive that is still breathing. Here's what the translators left out. That phrase, the reservoir of breath, appears one more time in Enoch. Chapter 61:5 uses the same Gaia's construction to describe the breath of the righteous dead being preserved until resurrection. Same word, same construction. Two different contexts. In chapter 61, it's the breath of souls awaiting resurrection. In chapter 17, it's the breath of whatever is sealed beneath the ocean floor. The parallel is exact. The text is using resurrection language to describe the contents of a deep-sea prison. What modern readers don't realize is how specifically this matches what oceanographers have found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. In 2020, a team at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology drilled sediment cores from the ocean floor of the South Pacific Gyre, the most lifeless region of the deepest ocean on Earth. They found something alive inside the cores, microbial cells, dormant, buried under more than 200 feet of sediment in rock layers over 100 million years old. The cells were still metabolically active. They were still breathing, still consuming oxygen at a rate so slow that one breath by their measurement takes 10,000 years. The lead researcher, Dr. Yuki Morono, described the organisms as existing in a state that had no scientific category, not alive in any normal sense, not dead, just waiting. Enoch wrote this around 200 BCE. In 2020, scientists found living things beneath the ocean floor metabolizing at rates that make a human lifetime look like a blink, sealed in sediment that formed before the dinosaurs existed. The text describes living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The science found living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The parallel is not metaphorical, it is structural.